Spring will be coming soon.
Hey guys, Andrew coming in. This one I have a little bit more of a difficult topic that I've been thinking about for a while. I've been wanting to make a video about this for a while because I think it's good for Americans to see this video. I think it's good for Europeans to see this video as a warning, actually, to not kind of make the same mistakes the United States has made. And I think it's important that the United States can maybe look at this video, if you are American, to realize there is a problem. How did the problem start? And is there a way to fix it? And we're talking about the opioid epidemic in the United States versus Europe or Sweden, where I'm currently living. I'm always constantly reminded, especially the last 2 years, I feel like it's gotten very, very bad. And when I go back home, I'm kind of reminded that there's this big problem happening. And sometimes if I'll check my Facebook or social media, unfortunately, I'll see someone that has been extremely affected by the opioid epidemic. And it kind of hits me really hard. And I look at it because the last 10 years is when this started to get very, very bad. This used to never really be a problem, and I'm trying to figure out why it's a problem, and I'm thinking back in my own head, and I kind of have my theory, and then I also think, why is it not a problem here? So I kind of talked about a little bit of this when I talked about the difference in healthcare in both countries, but like I said, I hope the United States can learn from this, to learn from some of the suggestions. People can see this video there, and I hope that Europeans can see this kind of as a warning to not make the same mistake. And then I have my theories from there. I also want to say as well that I respect anybody that works in the medical profession. I have members of my own family that work there. I respect doctors, and I respect anybody in healthcare in general. But I can't deny the fact that this seems like a reality. Also, I'm just giving you my perspective, my opinion. It doesn't mean it's right, but I think it's valid to give it to you simply because I'm overseas and I've seen this. That going in, it seems about the last 10 to 15 years. When I was younger, it didn't seem to be that there was a drug problem really anywhere near as bad as it is now in the United States when it deals with opioids. That would be pain medication or illegal means, like heroin and things like that. So just pills in general that kill pain. One of the main reasons I think this is a possibility is I think in the United States, when you're sick, when you have a problem, you want to get like a pill right away. I remember being sick as a kid, and you would just be prescribed you would get a pill, whether if you had a cough, if it could be pneumonia or not, before they even tested. They were just really quick to give you an antibiotic, for example. And I think that some people would be in pain, and it was very easy for a doctor to write a prescription for that so that someone could go back to work. So one of the things is we don't get a lot of time off of work for pain and other things, and maybe some people can't afford that so much. So maybe someone, for example, would injure their back, and then they would get on a pain medication, and then they would go back to work and continue to work, not knowing at the time that a lot of these pills you're going to get physically addicted to it after a very short amount of time, maybe a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, and you're going to start to become dependent on this. And I kind of feel like part of the problem has been that these pills and things like that have been overprescribed. It just seems like in the States, if you broke your arm, if you had a mouth surgery, for example, maybe getting your wisdom teeth taken out, you're automatically going to be written a prescription for Vicodin. And think about that. You're maybe 15, 16 years old when that happens. You're still in high school in the United States, and you're being prescribed a major painkiller. I would say on average, you could probably ask most Americans before the age of 20 to 22 that probably got prescribed a painkiller at one point in their life at a very young age. And I just don't think that happens at the same way in the United States. So when I look back, I think maybe it would be better to force someone not to take that, or give them like a 1 to 2 day supply and then have them switch to an over-the-counter one, than to give them a week supply of that drug. Painkiller drug. Because I'm not saying that like painkillers, you shouldn't be able to take them if you need them. I just think it got overprescribed. I think that's the biggest problem in the States, is that it got overprescribed and there's so many pills out there. And I don't want to go into details because we could argue that, there's drug companies in the United States that seek to have a profit from this. Maybe doctors got a kickback. I don't know. I'm not saying they did, but maybe they were encouraged to kind of write them. Either way, it just seemed like the drugs that got written were really high, and I don't think, like the amount of prescriptions, I don't think doctors at the time realized how highly addictive these painkillers could be. When I talk about the opioid epidemic affecting me in the United States. What I mean is just in my class alone, without getting into the personal details, this year I think we've lost, this is my graduating class in high school, we've lost 4 students due to drug overdose. Now, I don't know if they started on painkillers or what it was, but 4 this year. In total, in my class, we're talking about 7 to 8 kids out of 350 from my graduating class that died due to the opioid epidemic. I think that's unusually high. But here's the really, really disturbing thing to tell you how bad it's gotten in the States is when I went back and I would talk to people in the United States, especially this year, as like being worse than what it was before, I could talk to any other person that went to a different high school than me, and maybe my older sister, my younger sister, and everybody could agree and look at the numbers and say, wow, 4 to 5 people from my class have also died to this. And just looking at the fact that while I was in the States and looking at the news and things like that, it seemed like on a daily basis in a small town of 20,000 people, there were drug overdoses happening all the time. A lot of them related to what it looks like people would get hooked on painkillers. Maybe they were off of them. They were physically addicted. Maybe they turned to things that are worse, were like heroin or over-the-counter. Not over-the-counter, but they would just buy pills illegally. It kind of blew up. And it's really, really sad to see. When I try to think about why it possibly happened, I think you had 2009, because it seems to be a big problem with millennials around my age. And you had 2009, the economy took a turn for the worse, and a lot of people that were graduating college couldn't find the job that they wanted to find. And it seems like a lot of people that are getting into this, maybe they get stuck in their own town, they can't leave their town, they don't have the job maybe they want to have, or they get an injury and they get hooked. So some people get an injury, some people are just looking for something, some people aren't happy about kind of the situation they are in, and then they go through this, and it's a really, really, really sad thing to see. So when I go back to the States, I'm always kind of thrown into that reality that this epidemic is real and it's affecting people's lives, and people that I have known are no longer here, sadly, because of this, because they got addicted, because they got overprescribed, and it's such a massive problem on such a high scale. And I've heard stories of people that when they go to this pharmacy, I mean, they see people they can tell that are, addicted or trying to get a fix at the pharmacy, which is just really kind of a disturbing thing to hear about. Flash forward now being in Sweden, I just don't see it. I don't see the problem on a massive scale. I don't hear about it. I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I think it happens from time to time at any society or any country, because Sweden has very harsh drug laws, which I think is fantastic. I think in Sweden they're not going to hand out pills that easily. I've heard that Sweden doesn't want to give you a painkiller unless they have to give it to you. And there's that difference. I think in the States there must have been more of an incentive for that, and you don't see that here in Sweden as much. So my whole point of this video is if you live in Europe, and anyone that's in Europe in general, that's in a different country, maybe you can comment on it if it's gotten worse or what they've done. But I think they've really done a good job here, because it is such a nightmare in the States as far as this happening. This is probably the number, as far as like a societal issue, this is probably like the number 1, number 2 massive thing that we're dealing with in the United States that's very hard to deal with, that's difficult, that we need to get fixed, that's affecting a lot of people's lives, is this epidemic. And it doesn't exist in the same way in Europe, and I think it's because they're really like cautious to write prescriptions, and I think it's much more heavily regulated. And I'm sure it happens from time to time, but it's not, because it's not so easily available, because they're not overprescribing it, there's less people to have it, and there isn't really that much of it, I think, an underground like selling of these pharmaceuticals. And I think it's just fantastic, and I don't want Sweden to make the same mistake. I made this video so to talk about it so Americans can see that this kind of problem doesn't really exist at the same scale outside of the United States. This is not a whole world issue we're dealing with right now as much as a American issue. And I think it goes back to our philosophy as Americans, bigger, better, stronger, kind of in a sense, that we want to perform at our best, and we want to feel good right now, and we don't feel we have the time to recover. Whereas in Sweden, it's a different philosophy. I mean, if you hurt your back in Sweden, for example, you might be able to miss 2 weeks of work to fully recover, and maybe you just take an over-the-counter pain pill but you have the time to get over that, and you're not going to be prescribed something that is addictive over time. So it's awesome. It's awesome that the problem doesn't exist on the same scale. Like I said, I'm sure there's some issues in Europe where it could be a problem, but I don't see it on the same massive scale, which is fantastic. And I hope Americans can kind of learn from this. I think if we're going to fix the problem, the first thing we need to do is kind of stop subscribing or prescribing these pills so much, trying to educate people more, and seeing that maybe part of the problem is the societal thing. And also, I'm not saying that the drug companies want this to happen, but obviously they want people to take their medication. They make a profit if they do. And maybe in the very beginning there were some incentives to kind of give someone a Vicodin when they didn't really need one, to cause a problem with this. So I'm thankful that this problem doesn't exist in the same scale in Europe. And if you think I'm wrong, you can write it in the comments. But if you go to the States, it's something you might not notice, but it's something that people that have lived there the last 10 years that we notice. And I just think it's a sad thing in our society. And I don't think it's ever been this bad as far as the abuse. And it seems to hurt people that get in a rough spot. Like they hurt themselves, or they can't get the job they want. And I just don't like seeing this problem on such a massive scale in the United States. And it really is right now on a massive scale. And I hope that my country, America, can find a way to fix this. I love my country. I also am very proud to live in Sweden as well, and I'm happy to be here. So I hope you enjoyed this video and can see that my perspective is just to kind of point out how it's affected me personally. I don't really have an issue, like an opinion as far as what's the right way to answer that. I just want to say this is my experience. This is what I've noticed in both countries. If you like this one, I would love if you could give me a thumbs up, and feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will from time to time talk about these more, I guess, heavier issues, but not all the time. I try to keep my channel pretty lighthearted, but I was thinking about this one today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.